handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman, Seat, over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder, Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress, Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2 1. Grid to mark, Mike Charlie, 4 7 tree 9er, 8 9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds HEPT, gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us here on the Denise Simon Experience. You know, I reached out to some of my favorite people over there at the Heritage Foundation because they do some great work and they often write some pretty cool little short articles that we need to know what they're doing, and they end up in the Daily Signal, of which I'm a faithful subscriber. And so Ed Haislmaier has agreed to join us, and he's the Senior Research Fellow at Heritage, and his specialty is healthcare. So, Mr. Ed, thank you for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience.
Thanks for having me.
We got 20 states that are suing, right?
Well, that's possible. I haven't kept count.
All right. Well, yeah. I think there were like 12, and then within a day of President Trump's signing of an executive order, I think it's become in vogue to sue over whatever he's attempting to do with Obamacare. But let me start off by asking this, because when it comes to these regulations with Obamacare, was Tom Price, back when he was Secretary of HHS, did we see any movements on getting rid of some of these regulations?
Okay. Yeah. So basically what happened, and actually I was sort of involved with this during the transition period, is right after the administration took office, they came out with a new regulation, a new rule. It was their market stabilization rule. And basically what they were doing is they were redoing some of the regulations that the Obama administration had put in. And the focus at that time was on trying to do things that could be done quickly in terms of changing Obama-era regulations to bring down costs for 2017, because this was February of 2017, and for the 2018 year. This is in February of 2017, and the insurers planning for 2018 had to sort of set their plans and premiums by May, June. So there was some initial regulatory relief that was done. Then the focus shifted to Congress, and appropriately what happened at HHS is they were sort of holding off doing anything further because you wanted to wait and see what got out of Congress. There's no point in doing, further work on something that might get changed by Congress. So that failed in the end of August. It became clear that Congress wasn't going to revise it anytime soon. So then you started to see the shift go back to the administration, where they picked up where they had left off, looking at things that could be done longer term. Remember that the stuff that was the focus in the beginning of the year was very short-term focused. I mean, there was stuff that was good stuff to do. It's just it wasn't going to move things fast enough, so they set it aside. So that's the stuff they're coming back and looking at now.
Could Tom Price, before he left his cabinet post, could he have been more aggressive or more assertive on kind of putting big red X's on some of these Obamacare regulations?
Well, I think a lot of that work was going on anyway.
Okay.
And also, it's not just HHS and Tom Price. I mean, this is the other thing. For example, the proposal in the president's executive order to redefine and allow, in a way that allows more small businesses to band together and buy as an association, that would really be the Department of Labor as the principal agency dealing with that, because the laws that would be interpreted would be employee benefit laws in the Department of Labor. So, different HHS, Labor, Treasury, they have different pieces of this. Sometimes they all have a piece of the same thing. Again, I think the administration as a whole, quite understandably, put all of that kind of on hold because they were waiting to see what came out of Congress first, and are now going back and looking at things in light of Congress not having been able to do repeal and replace legislation this summer.
You, in your piece, you mentioned there were three things. Obviously, you sort of covered the small business. Then you had another one, short-term options.
Right.
And then...
Well, the small business one is probably the one with that'll take the longest, but have also the most wide-ranging effects. Essentially, Obamacare puts rules and regulations and mandates, benefit mandates, in fact, on small business and individual market coverage. Small business coverage being plans for employer groups of 50 or fewer workers. But they don't put those same requirements on large businesses. So the idea of letting small businesses get together as association plans is mainly to allow them to find a way to sort of collectively be a large employer group and get out from under it.
Okay.
Well, get out from under the Obama regulations, really.
Yeah.
Now, that's going to take some time. On the other provision, short-term limited duration insurance, that one is actually probably the easiest one or the quickest one for the administration to do, because basically back in 1996, Congress said as part of original or earlier insurance provisions that short-term limited duration insurance would not be counted as individual insurance for purposes of applying new federal standards to it. Well, that was 1996. In the subsequent years, and a couple of years later, as they were writing the regulations around that, the question is, well, what did Congress mean by short-term limited duration? So they adopted a definition. This would have been the end of the Clinton years. They adopted a definition that said, well, any plan that's 12 months or less where you don't have a right to renew it. And that's essentially the definition that was in place, unchanged, all the way up until last November, just before the Obama administration left office, when the Obama administration changed it and said, well, no, any plan that's 3 months or less. And the idea was that they were going to force people to stay in the Obamacare market, and because what had happened is many middle-class, self-employed, healthier people were just saying, I can't afford this stuff anymore, and going out buying short-term insurance. Mm-hmm. So in part it was kind of, let's not let the passengers off the lifeboats because we need them to stay here and keep bailing out the boat.
Yes.
We need them to bail out the ship, so don't let them off the lifeboats.
I like that one.
Yeah. So anyhow, but that one is pretty easy from an administrative point of view. It's very simple for the for the Trump administration to say, well, look, there was no real justification for what the Obama administration did. We're just going to go back to the long-standing previous definition. End of story. They're not making anything new up. So that's kind of they might even get done by the end of the year.
Now, the third one you mentioned was health reimbursement arrangements.
Yes.
I'm confused.
Okay,
I don't have a clue what that is.
Well, that's an employer plan that's been around for a while, and basically, what the employer does is say, "Well, I will reimburse you, the employee, for your health care costs," and they set money aside for that. The interest in that is because, in theory, what you could do is the employer could say, well, look, you, the employee, just go out in the market and buy an individual market policy for yourself, whatever you want, and then I, the employer, will reimburse it. So rather than giving you extra money as taxable cash salary, I will give you the money in the form of tax-free payment for your health insurance.
Like an expense, like a business.
Yes, but it becomes tax-free to you, just like employer coverage is today. But you could buy individual portable coverage of your choosing with it. Now, that's why it's of interest, and that's why people have wanted to go in that direction. it's still potentially of interest. The problem is that Obamacare came along and wrecked the market. So there's not a lot for you to buy out there if your employer gave you that money. So in the short term, it probably doesn't do that much right now. What it does do, though, is it moves in the right direction, or at least shows that the Trump administration is thinking in the right direction, which is we want to personalize this. Instead of the government or the employer controlling it, we want to personalize this. And people should be able, if we're going to give a tax break, you should be able to get the tax break whether you buy your insurance through your employer or buy it on your own. So it is moving in that direction.
Interesting. That's an interesting one there, because I mean you can just kind of do it as a business expense, or
it's the tax thing. I mean, see, the thing is, if your employer says here's a car, for your personal use, well, the government wants you. They treat that as being income to you, and you're going to be taxed, and you have to not only pay income tax, you have to pay the Social Security, Medicare, FICA payroll tax as well, plus state income tax if you live in a state with income tax. So, but when the government says, when your employer says, well, they could spend the same money instead of, they could say, well, I'm going to spend $3,000 leasing you a car. Now that's added as $3,000 to your income. I'm going to spend $3,000 giving you health insurance. Hey, poof! It's like you never got the money. It's not taxed. That's why it's a great, the employer-provided health insurance is this big middle-class tax break. It's huge. And that's why most Americans with insurance have employer-provided insurance. There are about 150 million Americans, about half the whole country, are covered by employer-provided insurance because of this big tax break. The downside to it is you sort of get what your employer gives you, right? It's not like saying, well, here's a tax break for your insurance, go out and buy what you want.
Ed, let me ask you, because I've asked a couple of people this question, and it's almost a rhetorical question, but let's kind of go all the way back to 2010 and Obamacare. What did Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats' Obamacare fix that was broken about health care in the first place?
Well, in their worldview, let's start with that.
Okay, fair enough.
In their worldview, healthcare should be something. Well, yeah, but that's a little fuzzy as well. If people use the term "it's a right," you have to ask it's a right to what. Well, no, that's a significant question. In this country, you have a right to get treated in the emergency room. You have a right to a health insurance card in Canada or Britain, but you show up at the emergency room, they can turn you away. So what do you have a right to? I mean, that's an important question, but let's set that aside. In their worldview, basically healthcare should be something where everybody is covered, and one, and two, that it covers pretty much everything, and three, people pay little or nothing directly out of pocket for it. That's kind of their worldview of how the world ought to work. And so they try to get as close as they can to it.
Sorry.
Now, Bernie Sanders wanted to just have the government come in and take everything over. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, and well, at that time Harry Reid, I guess, was the majority leader, realized that the cost of doing what Bernie Sanders wants to do is you were going to have to take another 10 cents out of every dollar earned by every American from minimum wage on up in taxes to pay for this, and that there was no way they were going to get the American public to swallow that. So rather than create the Bernie Sanders government-run program and tax, and add a 10% payroll tax to every American from busboys and dishwashers all the way up on every dollar you earn, they instead said, well, we're just going to commandeer that existing private market and tell them what to do. And then we're going to subsidize some people that we think need subsidies.
And then we're going to subsidize the insurance providers.
Well, they did some of that too. I mean, that's what's silly about the cost-sharing subsidies. I mean, what's really so funny about this is they're all screaming about it, but the reality is that the insurers are going to get this money one way or another, because what they're telling the insurers on these cost-sharing subsidies is make your plan, give this person a plan that has a premium, and then after you've done that, make it more generous by having low copays and deductibles, but don't raise the premium to cover the cost. We'll just give you the equivalent extra premium through the back door. So if you take that away, as President Trump just said he would, then what are the insurers going to do? Well, they're going to just add it on at the front door, which is exactly what they've done. That's why premiums have gone up. But the interesting thing is, because those people who qualify for those plans are so heavily subsidized for their premiums, they're not going to notice. It doesn't matter to them. And so this whole thing, people be uninsured, no, nobody's going to lose coverage over this. In fact, they're barely going to notice because they're already, the government is
already subsidizing them.
Right. So if the premium is 100 and the government says you have to pay 75, you don't care whether the premium goes from 100 to 120, and we'll pick up the difference. You don't care if it goes from 100 to 125, 150, 200, whatever, right? All you have to pay is 75. That's the situation everybody said. And you don't have to take this from me. I mean, this is something the Congressional Budget Office said. There was a whole report in August that the Congressional Budget Office did showing this. So the reality is, and this is why it's such a strange thing that the Democrats are fighting over this, the reality is that these people are going to continue to get the plans they get today, and it's just that they're going to pay the insurers through the front door instead of paying them 3/4 through the front door and 1/4 through the back door. They're going to pay them 100% through the front door. It was a goofy system to start with. Don't even get me started on that. How they came up with it.
Yeah, and I mean,
Even
I
Bill
never
Clinton
saw
said that.
Yeah, he did. Thank you. But there are so many gimmicks on how I mean, there's supposed to be only two sides to a ledger, but here there's 2,000 sides to a ledger on what that happens to the dollars and how they move it and then the Democrats, you got 20 states as of I don't know, 2 days ago or something, that we're going to sue because we're not going to take government money and give it to the insurance companies now. But it like you just said, it kind of doesn't matter. And then the Democrats are using it as a talking point. Nancy Pelosi said this is a matter of life and death.
No, it's a matter of accounting.
Well, Chuck Schumer keeps telling us, Ed, we want to work with the Republicans. I don't watch this stuff 24/7. You probably do, since this is kind of your sandbox. But I haven't seen one thing that a Patty Murray, a Chuck Schumer, a Nancy Pelosi, a Bill Cardin, anybody has even offered to say, well, we know it's broken because we've heard them say it, and we want to help them fix it. But they haven't. There hasn't been anything put on the table, has there? Or have I just missed it?
No, and this is the interesting question, because what happened is that you really created that really resulted in two different markets, and I've written a lot about this. One is these people who are getting subsidized coverage. I mean, basically, before Obamacare, you had an individual market of about 12 million people, and nobody was getting a subsidy, or they were getting a tax break, but that was about it. Now you have an individual market of 17 million people, but half of them are getting subsidized coverage, and the other half are buying on their own. Well, the half that's getting subsidized coverage, the Republicans all along have been willing, including in the bills this summer, to continue some sort of subsidies to make sure those lower income people can continue to have their coverage. What the Democrats have failed to recognize, it appears, is that the other half are middle class people who saw their premiums skyrocket, who saw their choices shrink as insurers pulled out, who got nothing out of this legislation except more cost and pain, and who are madder than heck. And given the number of Democrats that those people have turned into former congressmen, one would think that the Democrats might want to do something to win them back.
Yes.
But they don't apparently seem to think that. So I don't know. But but those are the people who are most upset about this, because it's been all pain and no gain for them.
I want you to start two movements here. One is, work with me here, Ed. I want you to start a class action suit that we sue to have the entire name of the law changed from Obamacare or Affordable Care Act to No Care Act, because how many people are without it because all these policies have been canceled on them?
Well, this is actually something that concerns me, and that I wrote about. I've been tracking the enrollment data as insurers, because insurers have to report this data as part of their regulatory filings with states. And we're actually seeing a decline now in the number of unsubsidized individual market customers. And my concern is that more of the middle class formerly insured are now becoming uninsured. So the concern is that Obamacare has gone from insuring the uninsured to uninsuring the previously insured.
Yeah.
And that's the danger here. And that's what we're talking about in terms of people needing relief.
All right, let me ask you this one last question here. We keep hearing this White House saying that Obamacare is collapsing. It's imploding on its own. How do we know when it collapsed?
That I'm afraid the President Trump and a lot of folks on the conservative side are mistaken on how this works. The reality is it doesn't completely collapse. What it does do is it turns into this divided world, this bifurcated world, where the exchanges consist of basically the only people on there are people who are low enough income to qualify for the subsidies and sick enough to want to spend whatever they have to spend to be on there. So even if you're low income and healthy, you're probably not going to buy. And it becomes basically, and I think this is where we're close to being, is a giant de facto high risk pool. And where that winds up is you will have at least one insurer who will provide it as long as the government's is
subsidize
it. Yeah, and that's why, for example, I did not when there were announcements that there were so-called bare counties with no insurers, and some people thought it was collapsing. And I said no, because what happens? Some insurer came in. Why? Well, think about it think about it this way. If there's no insurer in there, then you get to go in and be a monopoly. Now, what's the market? Well, it's a bunch of poor, sick people, so it's not exactly a great market. But wait a second. As a monopoly, you can charge whatever you want. And two, they aren't paying. The government's paying for them. So you'll get paid. Why not do that? So what happens is you get one insurer, and it'll be an insurer who's used to dealing with that kind of a population in most cases. It'll be a Medicaid managed care insurer. That's why Centene went into Nevada and a number of states. That's why you saw when there were bare counties in Ohio, CareSource, which is a regional Medicaid managed care plan there in Ohio and Kentucky and West Virginia. They went into those counties. Sure, hey, they're poor, sick people. We're used to dealing with that. And the government pays for it. And unlike traditional Medicaid managed care where we have to negotiate with the state, this thing's on autopilot. We charge whatever, and the federal tax credit just picks it up.
Yeah, yippee, skippy.
But people who aren't poor and sick won't want to be in that market.
Well,
so that's where it devolves into. I mean, we're already at the point where there were 5 states last year that had only one insurer for the entire state in the exchange.
Yeah.
For 2018, for this year, 2017, 5 states. For 2018, it'll be 8 states.
Ed, I thought it was ludicrous before this interview got started. Now I think it's even more ludicrous because you explained it so well. And stop doing that because it makes us matter.
Sorry.
Well, keep writing over there at the Daily Signal, and I'm going to keep calling.
Okay.
Well done, ladies and gentlemen. Give a big, huge round of applause to Edmund Haislmaier at the Heritage Foundation. You can find his pieces over at the Daily Signal, Senior Research Fellow, where his sandbox is healthcare. Great job, Ed. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, come back again.
Okay.
More coming your way, ladies and gentlemen, so stay with us.
This is Don Newen, co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep. Join me as I call into my Intel analyst, Denise Simon, for my daily situation report, or Sit Rep, the Drive Time Sit Rep. Check talkamericaradio.us for more information and show times.
Let me talk to you, black people. When you vote for blacks and put them in office under the banner of the Democrat Party, please explain to me what black people get as a result. This was not a nap that we have been taking. We are in a coma. You know what the interesting thing about pensions is? That's today's money given to people who ain't doing nothing for you today. Get off that black Democrat tit that they've been sucking on. Your country is being stolen from you, and the promise is being stolen from your children, and they're telling you it's all right while the rest of the world is trying to lap us. Well, why are we doing so poorly? 2 words: teachers' unions. Are you kidding me?
Black Man Thinking, Monday nights, 9 p.m.
Hi, this is Donna Fiducia, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio. For 28 years, I was in the mainstream media, most recently as an anchor at the Fox News Channel. No more. Ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has completely failed the American people. Radio networks like Talk America Radio will not fail you. Radio shows like Cowboy Logic Radio will not fail you. Check out the entire roster of over 60 weekly radio shows by visiting talkamericaradio.us. That's talkamericaradio.us.
TalkAmericaRadio.us.
Ladies and gentlemen, Neil Bortz, the Talkmaster, is back.
God, I'm getting so tired of hearing people talk about what a horrible country America is. If you don't like it here, pick a better damned country. You are free to do so. Oh, calm down, Bortz.
ConnectPal.com/BortzCast.
There is no data that shows that police are any more adversarial toward blacks than they are toward whites.
ConnectPal.com/BortzCast.
And damn it, you jocks, why don't you talk about this culture of violence in your community? Ever? Okay.
ConnectPal.com/BortzCast.
People in Atlanta are actually throwing a massive birthday party for Jane Fonda. Gag me. This woman is a traitor.
ConnectPal.com/BortzCast.
I suspect just your normal collection of brain-dead left-wingers.
ConnectPal.com/BortzCast.
Child raping, goat screwing, cult of Islam.
ConnectPal.com/BortzCast.
See me stuttering? That's how pissed off I get about this.
ConnectPal.com/BortzCast.
I am anal. I am obsessed about the idea of protecting my family.
ConnectPal.com/BortzCast.
People who own guns for the protection of their families are people who would be more likely to survive in the absence of government.
Go to ConnectPal.com/BortzCast right now. Sign up and experience Neil Bortz again like never before.
ATA Digital Dallas. Talk America Radio. Simulcasting on WDDQ, Talk 92.1, Adel, Valdosta, Georgia, and WJHC, Talk 107.5, Jasper, Florida.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for staying with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. You know, when I want experts, I don't have very far to go because I generally just trot on over to the Heritage Foundation, and sometimes I get to snap my fingers, and I mean they're right there. And so Rachel Glezsler has graciously accepted the offer to come on and talk about this tax reform thing. And I'm a little skeptical about all of this, but Rachel's going to talk me off the ledge, maybe. Are you, Rachel?
I hope so. I'm more optimistic.
Well, I'm glad you are, because I'm going to just kind of start off this way. I'm seeing that this what we're being proposed and what's kind of going through the hallways of the Capitol building is really not tax reform, but it's a tax rate change. Did I get that right? Am I seeing this the way you smarter people are seeing it?
Well, it can come across that way, I think, to some people, but if you look down at all the details, there's really more than just the rate change there. I mean, yes, we're going from 7 different rates and simplifying that down to 3 different rates, but there's a lot more in it. So for the average American, 70% of taxpayers who don't itemize their deductions, well, there's going to be a doubling in the value of the standard deduction. So a single taxpayer gets to deduct another $6,000 per year. Married taxpayers get to deduct another $12,000 per year. Families with children are going to get a larger child tax credit. And then while there's not as much in there as I would like to see in terms of getting rid of all the deductions and things that are in there that create special interest, so far I am really happy to say that they're holding on to what I see as the most important one, and that's eliminating the state and local tax deduction. That's something that primarily benefits wealthy individuals living in really high tax states. It encourages those states to raise their taxes and shift the cost to federal taxpayers that live in lower tax states. So right now, that's still in there, and that's something that we have estimated at the Heritage Foundation, that by eliminating it, you can reduce rates by as much as 16%. So that's a big tax cut for middle-class Americans. And there's also important things on the business side here. There's corporate tax reform, significantly lowering that rate to make us more competitive, and also small business, a big rate reduction there from 39% to 25%. So I think it's more than just the rates here. There's simplification, there's big tax cuts, and this is something that we should all support.
All right. Well, that helps me a little bit.
It's certainly better than the status quo.
Oh, yeah, yes. Now, you had mentioned taking us down to 3 brackets. I heard the 3 brackets, but then late last week it kind of went up to 5 as kind of a, I guess, an olive branch over to the Democrats, because in order for them to kind of buy into this thing, they proposed 5 plus a minimum wage hike. Are you hearing any of that chatter, Rachel?
Yes, I have seen that. Actually, I heard of 4 different rates. So adding on a higher tax rate above that current proposal of 35%. What that tax rate will be, we don't know. Maybe it stays at the current 39.4%. But I think it's really unfortunate that that's where they're headed, because, all the emphasis has been, oh, this is just going to be tax cuts for the wealthy. We shouldn't be able to benefit wealthy individuals in tax reform. But you can't have tax reform without benefiting so-called wealthy individuals. I mean, we have the top 10% of income earners are paying 90% of all taxes. So if you're going to have tax reform that only addresses 10% of the total taxes we collect, that's not tax reform. And the focus here is you need to get the rates down. That is the biggest thing you can do for pro-growth reform, is to drive down the marginal rates. Unfortunately, they didn't address the rates on capital gains and dividends, which would be another significant pro-growth thing there. But it is really unfortunate to see that they might be caving and potentially keeping that top rate where it is now.
Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm hearing then is it's kind of a hybrid. We've cleaned up some things in the tax code, and then we're proposing some different rate brackets. So it's not a complete reform, but it's a quasi retooling of, I guess, maybe some things that they think that they could appease some Democrats with, right?
Yeah, I think that's what we've come to. If you got a group of economists in a room and they said, here is the best optimal tax system you can have, and then you take that to politicians, you're never going to be able to sell it to them. And so what they're doing is kind of paring down a little bit. But fortunately, there are still some positive things in there. And, I think it's not worth throwing out the whole package just because it's not 100% of what we'd like to see.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the other obstacles that the Democrats are kind of throwing in? I mean, what other sand in the gears are you hearing as far as their opposition goes?
One of the things is this issue of the state and local tax deductions. So you have, it's not even Democrats on this, it's mostly Democrats, but there's also some Republicans in states like New York and California and New Jersey who are trying to put their foot in the ground and say, I won't vote for a package that eliminates the state and local tax deduction. That, at the same time, ironically, they're saying, we want a package that doesn't just benefit the wealthy. Well, the only way that you can say you don't want to eliminate this deduction is if you are looking out for the wealthy taxpayers, because that's who it benefits. The average millionaire in New York, California, New Jersey, they're deducting hundreds of thousands of dollars in state and local taxes that they're paying to their governments there. And then you have places like Florida and Texas, and they're deducting almost nothing because they have lower taxes. And so you have these people that make the same amount, and if you live in a high tax state, your federal tax bill is lower than if you live in a low tax state. Well, that's not fair. And so I think it's unfortunate that that is something that a lot of people are saying, this is a line in the sand for me, and I can't vote for it if it includes this. So far, fortunately, it's still in there, and I think a lot of people are committed to keeping it in there, including the president.
We keep hearing this term pro-growth, Rachel, and it'll benefit the middle class. What does that really mean? Because we've heard the term so much that I guess we don't even. I think the definition has been diluted. Can you kind of help us? I mean, at this point, we don't even know what pro-growth is. I mean, we like to think we know what it is, but I'm not quite. I think the definition's gotten tangled up.
Yep. So some things that are absolutely pro-growth: lower tax rates, getting rid of deductions and loopholes, simplifying things so that people don't have to pay a ton of money to tax lawyers and accountants to keep track of things. And on the corporate side, it really comes down to the rates and then having a territorial tax system, which this would do to kind of get rid of the incentive that we have now to drive companies overseas, have them take their jobs and their investment and their capital with them. So those are the big things that I would say are pro-growth. The rates, the deductions, and then corporate, reducing the rates and having a fair tax system that doesn't double tax income that U.S. companies earn versus foreign companies.
Mm-hmm. Do we really believe that it's going to benefit, the middle class? And I'm not even sure I know what the parameters are for middle class anymore either. Have we diluted that one?
Yeah, I mean that, you could be anywhere probably from $50,000 to $200,000 in middle class these days. Absolutely, I think these people are going to see, on average, a pretty sizable tax cut because of the fact that you're doubling the standard deduction and you're lowering the rate significantly. You also have the added child tax credit in there. So on average, yes, the middle income Americans are going to see a tax cut, but what's not included in these estimates is what are the feedback effects. And so if small businesses face a 25% top marginal rate instead of a 39% one, how many more jobs are they going to be able to create? How much more of that additional revenue that they get to keep are they going to pass on in the form of higher incomes to their workers? All these benefits that feed through, that doesn't come in when you just have a score coming from the Joint Committee on Taxation or CBO. So I think we need to be aware that the actual benefits are much larger than the stated ones.
Rachel, is this going to come down to somewhat of a Arkansas standoff, if you will, between the Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee?
That's yet to be seen. I don't know if I want to put a guess on what's
come on,
happen
take
there.
a shot. Take a shot.
I mean, we've got the Senate budget that's passed, and I know that the House would rather have seen some more spending side cuts there than just the $1.5 trillion tax cut. But I don't know that they're going to push and add it back in. I certainly don't think that the Senate has gone too far in their budget to make the House not want to vote for it. So I think there's going to be enough support. The House has come out and said it's not everything we want, but we're happy with what the Senate has done here. So I think they take that package. Reconciliation procedures are in place so that this can, go back to the Senate with only requiring a 50-vote threshold. So I think, chances are looking a lot better now. To potentially even before the end of the year, we could have significant tax reform.
I see this almost as a desperation kind of thing because the Republicans need something to happen here.
They do.
Okay, all right.
They've had a lot of failures.
Yes. Now, you mentioned spending, and Senator Paul has, I think, been the only one outside of the Democrats that have even spoken about spending, and the Democrats have really never discussed spending. But I haven't heard the Republicans actually talk about spending either. Have you?
Not a lot. And, in part, we don't blame them too much for this because what they're dealing with now is something that's not a dynamically scored proposal here to say, what's the real cost going to be to the economy and to taxes. But yes, they should absolutely be talking about spending. The House had passed a budget that would have cut $200 billion, in mandatory spending programs. It's just, a start on what we really need to do. I mean, there need to be massive reforms there to, address these rising and unsustainable entitlement costs. The House passed that, but the Senate didn't include anything in their budget. They look like they might be breaking the Budget Control Act caps. They've, called for an increase in defense spending, which is needed, but they should also be calling for subsequent reductions in other types of non-defense domestic spending. And so there's not been enough done there to address the spending. It's not as though we're in a situation where we're really just spending everything as wisely as we could, and all these programs are absolutely necessary and they're the proper role of the federal government to be doing them. So it's unfortunate that more Republicans haven't been coming out and saying, let's accompany these tax cuts with some of the spending reforms that we all agree we need to be doing. I don't know how much of that is just political and knowing that you lose all the Democrats if you're going to cut any spending, or how much of it is the Republicans themselves not wanting to cut the spending.
Well, and all this chatter from the Democrats when they go spending, and the debt, but I haven't actually heard where they think they want to, chop off some spending. Have you?
Oh, no, they don't want to chop off any spending unless it's giving money back to wealthy individuals
just checking.
In the form of lower taxes.
Just checking to
They'd
see
rather increase the spending.
Yeah, Chuck Schumer. Now, where is if Heritage was to prioritize some spending cuts? Is entitlements on the first line?
It's not something that we would take. You wouldn't get the spending cuts in the immediate years from the entitlement reforms we would propose. But yes, that's one of the first things that we would say has to be done, because you just look at the budget and entitlements overwhelms it. You cannot balance the budget even by eliminating all domestic non-mandatory spending, in the long run. And so, yes, you absolutely have to address the entitlements. And the thing there is just get them back to their original intent. These were not meant to just provide for everybody once they reach a certain age. These are anti-poverty programs for people when they have no ability to work or, are declining in health. So going back to the original intent of those programs, but we also have plenty of recommendations for how to reduce domestic non-mandatory spending. We've come out with a blueprint for balance, blueprint for reform, these documents for the last couple of years. We show how you can balance the budget within 7 years in that. And so it's not that these are just things we're saying you have to cut 20%. We're showing proposal by proposal. We've got over 100 individual proposals in there of how you actually get to that balanced budget within 7 years.
And yet we don't hear a lot of discussion out there on waste, fraud, and abuse, do we?
No, unless it comes to paying for things, The president has certainly talked about, I'll pay for this by getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse and Medicare or these systems. And there's certainly, there's legitimate waste, fraud, and abuse, but there's not enough to balance the budget by eliminating it all.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say we've got, and I think I've read this in some of the Heritage proposals, that we have got some government entities that just don't need to exist anymore, that cost us some huge dollars. And I think some of that can be framed with maybe the Export-Import Bank being at the top. Did I get that wrong?
Nope, that's right. Yeah, and so one of our most recent initiatives is addressing an executive order from the president to reorganize the federal government. So we came up with another blueprint for reorganization, we call it, and we've recommended eliminating, agencies, offices, programs across all different areas of the federal government. And the process we, decided upon which ones we recommended eliminating is this the proper role of the federal government? Does the Constitution specify that they should be providing this service, or would it better be left to state and local governments or to the private sector? Is this program showing favoritism to some and not opportunity for all? And that Ex-Im Bank is the prime example there. And then is this wasteful, duplicative, or inefficient? And there's so many ways that you can, merge different offices and programs together, wholeheartedly get rid of some, just consolidate, improve functions. So many things that you can do to save the taxpayers' dollars and to provide better services, and honestly to improve, the role for federal employees. They get a bad rap, but they're, having to deal with these systems and inefficiencies that make no sense.
I agree with that. Not all of them are bad, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I want to throw block grants into the mix here, because we keep saying, oh well, we're gonna let the states decide, and we're gonna block grant those funds back and so forth. But that still means that the federal government is spending this money. It's just that the states get to decide, and so it's kind of like taking it out of one pocket and just putting it into another. So when I hear block grants, my hair stands on end. Does it for you?
It does, and there are some cases where you might have something that's a federal, government provision, something we should be providing by the federal government, and it might be the best decision to let the states, use their knowledge of their own constituencies and residents to find the best way to implement that, but that's not the solution for everything. A lot of the times when we're talking about block grants, we're talking about welfare programs and other things that really are more appropriately left to state and local governments because they do know their constituencies better. So yeah, it's not a catch-all solution. It's, in many ways, it's just a way to say, okay, the federal government's going to pick up the tab for whatever you state and local governments decide you want to do with it.
And then there's really very little oversight. It's kind of like, okay, here's $100 million, you guys go figure it out.
Yep. Exactly. Unless you're in a situation where, the federal government's giving you a very small amount of what the state absolutely has to spend anyways, then you can kind of count on them to reliably do it because they're still going to be picking up every marginal dollar that they're spending. But that's not the case with a lot of these programs. It's a percentage match, which is very inefficient because it says, okay, you make a bad choice and you're only going to pay 25% of the cost, or, you massively expand this program, doesn't cost you that much. So.
During the campaign, we heard some of the candidates talk about, filling out the tax return on a postcard. Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem to be a topic that anybody's even really having that discussion on anymore, is it?
No, and thinking about the plan that's being proposed, does it do enough that you could get it on a postcard for most taxpayers? Probably not. Potentially for some that are just taking the standard deduction, a single filer. It's still something I've heard it talked about. We had an event just last week at the Heritage Foundation with Chairman Brady there, and it was talked about there, and that's definitely a goal, and we want taxes to be simpler and people to understand them and not have to pay for software or accountants. But it hasn't been a rally cry of, the current reform proposals.
Well, help the listeners here, Rachel, if you would, because a lot of people, for the sake of argument, we have reformed the tax code. You can fill out your return on a postcard and eliminate the IRS. I argue that the IRS will never be eliminated. Did I get that right?
I think that's right. Unfortunately, unless you get rid of the income tax. I think the only way you get rid of the IRS is eliminating the income tax and shifting to some form of consumption tax.
And is consumption tax actually even part of a discussion anymore in the hallways?
It's not. It's much more efficient than an income tax economically, but it's not what's being discussed today. It's such a big shift from where we are. And unfortunately for those who don't like to see tax cuts for the wealthy, that's what it would tend to be. So it's not a part of the current discussion.
No, but that would literally, people would have to go back to school, because that's yeah, that would be a true cultural change here, to go to a consumption tax, right?
It would, and there would be a big shift in prices at the beginning. You know, you're going to pay more for the services you get. Of course, you're taking home your entire paycheck instead of all these things being withheld from it. But yeah, it would be a huge change. You know, we're one of the only countries that doesn't have a national form of a consumption tax or value-added tax like they've got in Europe, but there it's not. It's just a component to one of their many taxes that they've got going on.
Anything? Are you seeing that what has been proposed here on these changes in tax rates and a few of these other items that you had mentioned, does that literally put the United States back into global competitiveness where we have kind of been lagging behind?
On the corporate side, it does. You know, it'd be great if we were able to stay with the president's original goal of getting down to a 15% rate. I believe the national average among the OECD or, you know, industrialized large countries is about 23.8%, and what they're talking about now is lowering that top rate to 20%. So it's not significantly lower, but yeah, it's definitely competitive. And it should help not only to keep the companies that are here now here instead of trying to push them abroad, but it would potentially create more incentive for some to come back, and certainly ones that are new companies that are opening up or that are expanding offices, you know, encourages them to do so in the U.S. as opposed to other countries with lower taxes.
Have all the consequences or the collateral damage kind of been weighed in on this? If this actually happens, Rachel, and it puts the United States in a much more competitive posture globally, are there consequences that anybody has estimated to that?
You mean negative effects for the US?
Yeah. Not really.
You know, I haven't heard much about that. I think it's all just pushing the positive. And this stuff, you know, it's not that we passed tax reform in December and suddenly there's a 10% increase in the number of businesses here. You know, these decisions, businesses make decisions planning long into the future, and so it'll be a slow process by which we hopefully see companies locate here or come back here. But I think, you know, I mostly think it's going to just be positive effects, especially from the corporate side there.
Is it going to happen by December? You know, that Christmas present thing?
It would be nice. I mean, the timeline, it's definitely possible to happen by then, and, you know, a huge advantage if it does, because you can potentially get it implemented a year earlier and really start the ball rolling with things like, you know, expensing for businesses. That's a big spur to companies to invest next year in, you know, new capital and equipment that's going to increase productivity, that translates into higher wages for the workers, you know, greater incomes across the spectrum. So it would be great if it can happen sooner, before the end of the year.
Early on, there were some discussions in the Trump administration that that this would happen, and it might be even retroactive for 2017. I'm not seeing that at all anymore. Are you?
No, I'm not. And, you know, retroactive stuff, really, there's not a whole lot of point. You want to do things so that you're encouraging businesses, individuals to take certain actions. And so if we say, well, you already made that decision to purchase the machine, and we're just going to give you a windfall benefit, you know, there's not a whole lot of point to that.
Rachel Glezsler from Heritage Foundation, thank you for kind of turning on a dime here and joining us here to kind of set some things straight when it comes to this tax adjustment to the code, I guess. That's the best way to put it, but we appreciate your expertise, and come back again soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. More coming your way, ladies and gentlemen, so stay with us.
You can't handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman, Seat, over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder, Seat, out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress, Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2-1. Grid to mark, Mike Charlie, 4-7 tree 9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds HEPT, cast TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for staying with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. I travel all the way to the West Coast, and I tapped an old buddy on the shoulder here, someone I haven't talked to in a long time, and he was graciously accepted the invitation to be here with us tonight on the Denise Simon Experience, and that's retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Robert Patterson, otherwise known as Buzz, Mr. Buzz, who was a former senior military aide to President Clinton, successful author of, I think, at least 4 books. And he's a busy man. He's a man on a mission out there in California doing public speaking and consulting, and he's got his own website now called buzzpatterson.live. I've been watching him. So, Mr. Buzz, thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience.
It's always a pleasure, Denise. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, you always have some stories to tell. I mean, the encounters that you have all the time. So I'm going to just throw some random questions out here for you. One of them is, we've just heard that we have our B-52s on the ready. Now, explain to the listeners, if you would, what that necessarily means.
Sure, it's a state of alert, Denise, that we used to use all the time back during the Cold War, when we thought war with the Soviet Union might be impending at any moment, and so it's a state of alertness where we actually have crews that are in places. They can get to their airplanes very, very quickly. They can get their airplanes started and in the air within a matter of just a few minutes. That's a classified number in terms of the minutes, but trust me, it's very, very quick. So what that tells me is that we have our guys probably not only based in Japan and probably also down in Guam, where we could be up in the air very, very quickly to either retaliate if North Korea does something foolish like fly another missile over Japan or fly one toward Guam, either retaliate or at least a show of force where we would be showing the flag, and we could show that we could do that very, very quickly. So the capability we've had for decades. I used to sit alert a lot when I was just a youngster back flying in the Air Force back in the 80s and 90s. So the capability is real. We can have those airplanes in the air in a matter of a few minutes, and they can be jetting their way toward North Korea or Pyongyang. And trust me, if we launch them, it's a very real thing that should be taken seriously. And I'm sure that the radar controllers in North Korea are perked up and ready to see that possibly happen.
Buzz, back during the Cold War, I'm going to get this wrong, so you're going to have to correct me because my memories, I talked about it a couple of months ago, but I've since kind of forgotten it. But we did kind of these global loops, didn't we? Did we not? And we always kind of kept aircraft in the air with a certain kind of tag team circle thing around the globe, did we not?
We did, yeah. We used to always, what you're talking about was we always kept the presence in the air. And the Soviets did as well, so it wasn't just us. It was us both staring each other down. But what we have that they didn't have is we used to have what we used to call the National Airborne Command Authority, which was actually it's called Looking Glass. It was an airplane we kept in and we still have that capability. We have not used it on a 24-hour-a-day basis for quite a while, but we still have it, whereas it's a flying command post that can actually get into the air and stay in the air for hours because it's air refuelable by our refueling assets. So we actually have that capability to have a general on site in the air next to the forces we might be using, whether they be B-52s or B-1s or B-2s or submarine launches or missile silos. We have that capability, and we can restore it very, very quickly. But yes, what you're thinking about was those days back in the 80s, and just prior actually to the collapse of the Berlin Wall and and the Iron Curtain, where we both, the Russians, the Soviet Union, and us were staring each other down, on a daily basis. And that was really the height of the Cold War. And I think, as you're alluding to, I think that in a lot of ways we're getting back to that with the shenanigans in North Korea. And it's also kind of interesting to see that Russia and China are kind of, hands off a little bit here too, kind of want to see where this thing goes, because they used to play that game pretty well themselves.
Something in my gut tells me that we're necessarily doing some of these runs on a pretty consistent basis over in, the Sea of Japan, if you will. Because I think
no doubt.
Yeah.
Doubt.
Okay. All right. Well,
there's no doubt about that. Also, there's no doubt. I can guarantee you, Denise, that a lot of what has been speculated in the press about what North Korea has done or will do or is doing, and people like the New York Times or Washington Post will kind of feign this ignorance that we Americans can't possibly know. Well, let me tell you, there's probably not a square centimeter of the entire country of North Korea that's not being watched 24 hours a day, day and night by us, by our various assets that know. We see that every vehicle moving, every ignition of any kind of launch source, we're watching that stuff, and we know exactly what they're doing. So don't let your listeners be lulled into some kind of false sense of being numb to this, because we know exactly what's going on. So if something does go down, that's because we saw it going down well in advance.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I have said that to a couple of people, and I feel like I'm the only one out there that's saying, quit diminishing our abilities. And we've had these abilities, and we've been refining these abilities for decades. Now, why would North Korea want to be launching satellites for peaceful purposes?
They wouldn't. There'd be no need for that. The only thing is, and if you go back and look at the history of North Korea and this particular family lineage, they're very proud people, and it's all about them feeling like they're the small kid on the block. They've always had this historically, visceral need to appear bigger than they actually are to their neighbors to the south and to the Chinese, because they depend on the Chinese so much. And they've always kind of had a thing with Russia too, and with China. And of course they know that that China hasn't been, that Japan hasn't been armed. We have not allowed Japan to be armed for years. They're trying to play around with that because they know Japan's a very close ally. They know South Korea is armed to the teeth, and that we're there with them as well. And they know that Guam's not that far away, and neither are our shorelines of Alaska. So they've always had this thing where they've always saw themselves as being the upstart on the street. So if they're launching things like satellites and they're launching ballistic missile tests, they're doing it because they want to no longer be the little boy in the street. They want to be the big kid, the big bully on the street.
Thank you for saying that, because I agree. Now, we have actually shot down, we actually used, I think, some kind of a fancy jet a couple decades ago, where we destroyed a Russian satellite, correct?
We have the capability to do that. I would tell you that it's certainly not 100% reliable.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have the ability to do that. Japan has a similar ability to shoot down ballistic missiles of some sort, and we are, of course, as Americans, working on that daily with this potential threat. I don't know at this point how reliable it exists. But I can't tell you if I did. Even if I knew where we were at reliability wise, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Sure.
I just don't have 100% verifiability that we'd be able to do that without missing. So my big thing with North Korea has been, I love the way that Trump's gone forward with this thing and talking tough, because that's the way you deal with the bully on the street. And I love the fact that I know that we had the capabilities to do a whole host of things, whether you read about them in the papers or not, in his country, that we can diminish, if not remove completely, his capability. And what I read and hear from my insiders, my buddies that are still active, is that Trump is just waiting for the right opportunity, and that's what it will take.
Thank you. Let's trot on over to this global war on militant Islam, because we obviously had this sad event that happened in Niger where we lost 4 Green Berets, and yet I see so many people, even the conservatives, saying, "What in the world are we doing there?" And Buzz, I would argue that people just aren't paying attention. They just think that the entire war is either in Iraq or Afghanistan. They're not paying attention that we've got the Philippines, we've got Sudan, we've got Somalia, we've got Mali, we've got Libya. This is, when we've got 7,000 troops in Africa, in, I don't know, probably 50 or 60 countries, people seem to be just stunned. Are they just become desensitized to it all, that we're not supposed to be there, and let's get out, and the fact that Raqqa has been liberated and Mosul's been liberated, everything's fine now in the world and it's peace on earth tonight?
Yeah, sadly, I think I wrote about this on my news site, as you pointed out earlier, BuzzPatterson.live, not too long ago, Denise, is that most Americans, this is coming from a retired Air Force officer, so it's going to be a little bit biased, but Americans, number one, don't need to know everything that's going on tonight all over the world that involves our military forces. We are doing things in places that Americans don't even know exist. And I think it's, and this unfortunate event that went down in Niger is a perfect example. We are fighting these elements of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and global Islamic terrorism all across the globe. It's not limited to the mountains of Afghanistan or Pakistan or Iran or Iraq. It's everywhere. It's like, as you pointed out, it's in Asia, it's in Malaysia, it's in all parts of Africa have been affected by it. And we, the United States of America, we have the right to put our troops and our special operations troops, for sure. And I was involved in this back in the 80s and 90s, putting people in and out of all kinds of crazy places that most Americans to this day don't even know that we were there. But that's by design, and that's how we do it. We don't want the local residents of Niger to know that we're operating there, because we're trying to sneak in and sneak out of these places so we get to know what's going on without ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the powers that be knowing that we're there. And that's how we operate. We have professionals that operate very quietly at night, and God bless them. And that's what they do, and that's what my dad did in his time in the Air Force, and that's what I did. We were quiet professionals at night, and we operated in places that most Americans don't even know exist. And that should continue. Otherwise, we will never win this global war against radical Islam.
Well said. I'm the daughter of a retired Marine. But anyway, without a lot of fanfare, President Trump amended a George Bush executive order under emergency powers to lift the quota of 25 retired officers from each branch having the ability to be recalled back into service. And in the case of the Air Force, I think they're about 1,300 pilots short. That's an awful lot of pilots, Buzz. But he's given them the ability to recall up to 1,000. Yet the Air Force says they're not going to do that. And they were actually giving them signing bonuses of, I think, at one point of $35,000. As a two-part question, why would the Air Force not recall some of these retired officer pilots? And two, we also appear to have a drone shortage, hence a drone pilot shortage. I think we've got some bigger problems here, don't we?
We do, and those are both excellent questions. And I'll tackle them one at a time. Yes, Donald Trump did make a statement that said that he would allow the Air Force to return up to 1,500 of us retired Air Force pilots. And I'll be honest with you, Denise, I'm very attracted by that. If they
did you get your letter yet?
Yeah, if they allow me to come back and get behind and get into the left seat of an airplane again, I'll do it. So I think it's a problem that's been driven by a couple of factors. Over the years, especially under the Obama administration, The services really took huge cuts in manpower and in the ability to field pilots, train them up to proficiency, and put them in cockpits. And also, they failed. Obama administration failed to adequately apply for allow for the logistics of both airplanes and drones. So we have the Navy's hurting in terms of their spare parts for aircraft. The Marine Corps is hurting in terms of spare parts for aircraft. The Air Force is hurting in terms of spare parts for aircraft, and we're hurting in terms of drone capabilities. So we've allowed this thing to atrophy for 8 years under Obama, and now we have all these targets emerging on the horizon again. Not just North Korea, but we've got Islam, radical Islam still. We've got Russia. We've got China. We've got a lot of potential enemies out there. So I think Donald Trump is trying to do the best thing he possibly can. Now you couple that also, Denise, with the fact that the airline industry, which I was a member for 15 years until about a year ago, is hiring pilots in record numbers. So they're being paid more money to leave the military services and to go fly for American Airlines or Delta or United, and have more quality life, quote unquote, than they would normally have being deployed to Iraq 6 months out of every year. So a lot of young men and women pilots are choosing to take the commercial airline option. There is a worldwide pilot crisis right now. There's no way we have enough people right now to possibly sufficiently and adequately man our military services and our commercial airlines. So we're going to have to resort to very creative things like bringing old guys back that have got thousands and thousands of hours of doing this. And I think that's an easy solution. That's a quick one, but it's not the long-range solution. The long-range solution will be, again, to make military salaries competitive with private sector salaries and make the military lifestyle one that encourages you to want to stay and not one that encourages you to want to leave.
We also have a plane shortage because of these lack of parts, and then we got some that just seem to have an air, breathing problems too. Correct?
We've got a couple problems. We have not been acquiring new airplanes fast enough because of how complicated it's gotten. When you've got you're down to two major aircraft manufacturing companies, Boeing and Airbus. So if you're gonna buy American parts and labor, you're gonna buy Boeing. So we have not been in the commercial airliners also get all of their aircraft from Boeing and from Airbus. So you've got competition there. Now you've got a lot of like the B-52s you were referencing a little bit earlier. B-52s go back to the 1950s. They've been around literally forever. And they had been, remodified and retrofitted over and over and over again for 65, 70 years now, and they're old. And a lot of our refueling capability, the KC-135s, some of them, those are still up, but those are old airplanes.
They're very old.
We have not modernized. I mean, I think you probably have some still flying out of MacDill there. We have not modernized the U.S. Air Force and Marine and Navy capabilities equipment-wise, and at the exact same time, we've allowed to run out of spare parts for the older airplanes, and at the exact same time, we have not been recruiting and retaining pilots in the numbers that we need commensurate to the threat we face. So, President Trump has inherited a huge mess from Barack Obama, and George Bush did something to help along those lines, but Barack Obama just completely dropped the ball for 8 years, and now we're paying the back end bill of all of that.
So it seems like we've sold the Saudis an awful lot of planes. Can we go over to the Riyadh and say, hey, can we rent those planes back, or can we, if they're just sitting on, in some hangar someplace, can we borrow some of those parts?
What we need to do, we could do that. We just sold a whole bunch to Singapore today also. And as a matter of fact, that the problem is not on the production end say of Boeing. The problem is on the paying end of the U.S. national government. Yeah. So it's the supplies. The demand is there. The supply is certainly there. It's a lack of cash flow problem due to the incredible debt that we're in right now, and the fact that it was very unattractive under 8 years of Obama for anybody to want to try to fund aircraft acquisition for the military. Now, of course, under President Trump, it's very attractive again. But he's only been in office for 9 months, and we need to gin this thing back up pretty quickly. But yeah, other companies can pay, and we should have the ability to pay. But again, you've got a lot of aging airplanes. I'm not even sure they still make a lot of parts for a lot of what we're flying around up there with B-52s anymore. We're probably having to remanufacture those things, reverse engineer those things.
All right, let's switch gears here because if you notice, the left hasn't even said a word about any of these kinds of funding the military, the pilot shortage, the plane shortage, North Korea, militant Islam. They don't even talk about any of that. What they do seem to just talk about is this counter Trump revolution.
Yeah.
This guy can't brush his teeth to make anybody happy, can he?
He can't, and that's the reason why I'm chuckling is because tomorrow night Mrs. Clinton's going to the University of Michigan to talk about her book, What Happened. And on Thursday night, I get to go to the University of Michigan to talk about what really happened to her party, to her chances. To, anybody in
you
Ann
won't have
Arbor.
the same audience, will you?
Well, I don't know. Right now they're playing it. Well, she's going to be speaking there tomorrow night, and then they're going to play. I've got a commercial airing on University of Michigan TV that's going to say, "Hey, if you want to know what really happened, come to see me in two nights from now on Thursday, the 26th." So it's going to be a lot of fun to be there. So yeah, hopefully I won't have Antifa and all those idiots showing up. But yeah, going back to the thing about the left is I still really do watch people like Maxine Waters and Hillary Clinton, and I still they're just in such, they've had like renal failure. They cannot believe that their girl who was going to win this thing, like 90% to 10% or whatever their prognostications were, they cannot believe that her girl got beat, and got beat so badly that there's got to be a reason why. And it's got to be because, A, Trump cheated, B, all of us who voted for him are idiots or just ignorant.
All of that.
Or there's some kind of cabal behind the scenes that made this thing happen, and it's Russia. So it's hilarious to me. But the good thing is, from a conservative standpoint, if they can never get off that, we've got them. This is what Steve Bannon would tell you. If they can ever get off the fact that they in fact did lose and she was a horrible candidate, then we've got them 2018, 2020. We've got them for a long time because they're so stuck on stupid about this whole thing.
Stuck is right.
They can't move on. They can't acknowledge, okay, they screwed it up. She's a horrible person, number one, as I can attest personally. Horrible person. Number two, she's a horrible candidate. Number three, she ran a horrible campaign. Number four, she had a horrible campaign manager in John Podesta. And her message, she didn't have a message. Her message was the anti-Trump. Well, guess what? He won. So because people like us voted for him. And now they're still saying the same thing. The problem is Trump, not the fact that Hillary Clinton was a flawed candidate, a flawed human being. The longer they stay on that, the more we take this to the bank.
And, I keep hearing this thing about establishment Republicans, but nobody talks about the establishment Democrats, do they?
No. And it's, I think it's going to be interesting to see both sides, I think, in terms of what's going to be happening in the future. Both sides, I think, are going to be going through some dramatic changes. In my personal opinion, and I was just on the periphery of the Trump campaign last year, so I did my part in California and was just kind of on the outside looking in. But I will tell you this, people voted for Donald Trump because people are tired of the system. They see the process is broken and they're tired of it. They're tired of the Mitch McConnells, and they're tired of the Nancy Pelosi's, and they're tired of the Chuck
Harry
Schumer's,
Reid,
Harry Reid and the Lindsey Grahams. They're tired of all of it. And until people, and this is where the beauty of Steve Bannon comes in, for people who think he's a really caustic guy. He's not. I know him. I went to college with him. He's a great guy, and he has this persona that people just can't take because he's a bulldog. But he's exactly right. But what happens next is if you don't get in line with the Trump revolution, you're going to be going down too, because this is not just about Donald Trump. This is not a fluke. This is about the country has realized that we want things to go. We want things to go in a different direction, and it's time. And get on board and get out of the way.
Ladies and gentlemen, go over and visit buzzpatterson.live. Buzz is doing remarkable work over there, and he's got the forces against him out there in California. But God bless you, Buzz. I mean, you're working on it, and I'm happy to see it. And stay the course. I'm going to keep watching you and tapping you on the shoulder.
Please do, because I'm right here in the heart of the beast, and if you're a lawyer and you're getting surrounded in an ambush, you want to drive right into the ambush. So you've chosen to drive into that ambush. That's where we're at.
Thank you, Buzz, and ladies and gentlemen, stay with it because there's more coming your way.
Hi, this is Donna Fiducia.
And Don Newen from Cowboy Logic Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't go to sleep every night completely fatigued from trying to restore America from the destruction that is taking place,
then you're simply not doing enough. Join us every Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, for Cowboy Logic Radio.
Let the restoration begin.
Hi, this is Denise Simon, the host of the Denise Simon Experience. I feel compelled to tell you people that Don Newen is my favorite talk radio host, period. Not Mark Levin, not Rush Limbaugh. I can't do this.
Do it, Denise. Read it. Read it, Denise.
Not Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham, but yep, Don Newen. Cowboy Logic Radio is featuring the ever-stellar, highly gifted Don Newen, right here on Talk America Radio.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio. On behalf of my beautiful co-host, Donna Fiducia, I'd like to express my gratitude to Denise Simon for those kind words. I don't think I could have done it better if I would have written that myself. Cowboy Logic Radio, every Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on Talk America Radio. This is Don Newen, co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep. Join me as I call in to my Intel analyst, Denise Simon, for my daily situation report, or Sit Rep, the Drive Time Sit Rep. Check talkamericaradio.us for more information and show times.
KTA Digital Dallas. Talk America Radio. Simulcasting on WDDQ, Talk 92.1, Adel, Valdosta, Georgia, and WJHC, Talk 107.5, Jasper, Florida.
And thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. Very happy to have with us another stellar lawyer. I don't get to say that very often, but when I talk about the Pacific Legal Foundation, they are a group of stellar lawyers, and they're just working on cases that are amazing. And this one, I think, really goes to the 10th Amendment, but I have the distinct privilege of having Jonathan Wood with us, who is one of their DC-based lawyers. And it looks like he's going to be taking on a case that is getting some pretty interesting attention, and that is gambling, sports gambling, of all things. So, Jonathan, thanks so much for being with us here on the Denise Simon Experience.
Thank you for having me.
1992. Congress passed this cockamamie law. They want to protect us from ourselves, I guess. And sports teams from, I don't know, a Pete Rose kind of deal, I guess. But this law was called the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, which doesn't say anything about betting in that title, does it?
No. Most people hearing that probably wouldn't even realize what the law was about.
Well, Congress, in their infinite wisdom, I think thought that doing this law in 1992 would keep people from betting on sports. And you can go to any house on a Sunday, and I guarantee you're going to see some betting. You can go to offshore betting. You can go to see what the bookies are doing and who they predict. I mean, betting's going to go on and on and on. And yet, Jonathan, has anybody actually been indicted / prosecuted / sentenced in violation of this Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act law?
So indirectly, yes. So the PASPA, as it's known, the federal law, doesn't directly forbid sports gambling. Instead, it's really a one-of-a-kind statute where instead of Congress saying it's a matter of federal law, it is illegal to place a bet on sports. The statute instead says, states, you have to prohibit sports gambling and enforce it and police in any of this gambling. And so a lot of states would like to get out of the business of criminalizing sports betting. They recognize it as a very widely practiced activity, and prohibition, like in the early 20th century, just hasn't worked. People continue to place illegal bets, and so those states have no choice because under this law they must continue to enforce this prohibition. I'm sure there are plenty of states where people are in jail today just because Congress has forced the states to do this.
Well, I mean, not to really conflate the issue, Jonathan, but they are trying to force sanctuary cities to comply with federal law too. That isn't necessarily working out, is it?
And for the same reason. So our founding fathers wisely kept the federal government and the state government separate. That if the federal government wants to regulate people, it has to do so directly. It can't use the states as a puppet, just the same as states cannot try to control what policies Congress wants. And so for centuries, that division of power has been understood, and Congress hasn't tried to interfere with the states. And this is another example of a really recent phenomenon where Congress has tried to erode the Constitution's protection for federalism by dictating policy to states, and that creates huge consequences for our constitutional system. It discourages policy innovation by letting federal bureaucrats dictate one-size-fits-all policies on everyone, and prevents people from exercising the right to vote and having political accountability. So several years ago, the people of New Jersey actually passed a referendum by an overwhelming 2-to-1 margin calling for the legalization of sports betting. They passed that as a matter of state law, reasonably expecting that since the prohibition is written in the state law that they had a say in what New Jersey's law would be, and they were mistaken. The sports leagues have successfully sued time and again to prevent the state from doing what its citizens have asked it to do. And the sole reason is this federal law that is forcing the state to prohibit sports gambling.
There's some outside of the betting side of it. There's revenue that's at risk here too, is there not, to the states?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, this is really a bad deal for states like New Jersey. PASPA basically creates a monopoly for Nevada. It had sports gambling in 1992, so it was grandfathered in and continues to offer legal sports bets. So not only is the state of New Jersey forced to expend resources to enforce this failed prohibition, but it's also losing out on the tax revenues that it might get if some of the illegal sports bets were made legal and able to be taxed. Mm-hmm. And the simple reality is that PASPA has failed. The idea in 1992 was, well, if we prohibit sports gambling, it'll go away, and that will protect our sports leagues. And no one believes that actually happened. The illegal sports betting market is huge in this country. It's $100 billion enterprise. Everyone is okay with that. The sports betting isn't shunned the way it used to be. And in fact, President Obama, when he was president, went on the Stephen Colbert show and bragged that he violates that law by betting on the Super Bowl. And the host pointed out, that's illegal, sir. And he said, well, I'm the president. I'll just, pardon myself. And that's the reality. That's where we are today. We have this outdated law that hasn't worked. Everyone is violating it, but states don't have the breathing room to try something different.
Well, Obama used to get on TV and show us his March Madness brackets, and if I'm not mistaken, one of those basketball games was in Dayton, and he took Prime Minister David Cameron from the UK with him. Now, let me ask you this, Jonathan. We've got a 10th Amendment deal. We've got state legislatures, but we got a federal law. So I'm of the notion that instead of kind of going through the court cases, not that I don't want you guys to be able to argue something in court, but why haven't we just trotted back on over to the Congress and said, why don't you guys just repeal this thing?
Well, there certainly have been pushes to repeal the statute, but getting legislation passed through Congress is hard and has been for over a decade. It simply doesn't happen. And when you have a constitutional violation, particularly one as egregious as this, you can't wait for Congress. It's more important that the courts say this is unconstitutional, so that not only will this law be struck down, but Congress will be blocked from doing any similar law. But you can imagine the sort of mischief that D.C. could get into if Congress would start passing laws forbidding states from changing their own laws. That would allow Congress or federal bureaucrats to start dictating basically whatever they want to the states. They could control every single policy area you might care about, and that should concern all of us, regardless of whether you're conservative, liberal, or what you think about gambling. I for one, don't gamble and have no interest in it, but the idea that D.C. can dictate to states what their own laws have to be on whatever subject Congress wants is truly alarming and fundamentally at odds with our constitutional system.
Now, what you just described is, Jonathan, is that the anti-commandeering doctrine?
That's right. The Supreme Court has said that inherent in the 10th Amendment, the idea that Congress's power is limited, most power is left to the states to use as their citizens see fit, is the idea that Congress can't treat the states as a puppet. It can't try to commandeer that power the Constitution gives to the states, not the federal government, by forcing the states to exercise it in a particular way. It hasn't happened very often, as I said, for the first 200 years of our government. Congress didn't try to dictate to the states. It really is a recent phenomenon. But the two times the Supreme Court has been presented with the issue, it has rejected and declared the federal law unconstitutional both times. And we expect the same to happen here. The case challenging the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act is currently before the United States Supreme Court. They're scheduled to hold argument on December 4th. And given how blatantly unconstitutional this law, it's hard to imagine how it could survive that challenge.
The principle of private non-delegation. Tell us what that is.
Well, it's not at issue in this case, since the federal government is imposing this on the states, but it has come up it's a similar non-commandeering issue. Is what happens when the federal government, rather than exercising regulatory itself, tries to pass the buck onto someone else who isn't politically accountable. So it has come up in, I think, cases dealing with Amtrak and a few other government-created institutions that are privately run but exercise power in a way similar to the government. And really, the underlying concern in both private non-delegation and commandeering is the same. It undermines the political process to allow Congress to pass its power on or to try to impose policies without being clear that it's the one doing it. So if it empowers a private company to regulate you, Congress should bear the brunt of that. If it forces a state to impose a particular law on people, Congress should be held accountable. But when Congress tries to manipulate how the regulations are being imposed on people, it's really hard for voters to know who they need to vote out of office and who they need to punish. Most people have no idea that PASPA, a law passed by Congress, is why their states prohibit sports gambling, and reasonably so. It's a difficult thing to find out. One of the things we focused on in our brief to the Supreme Court in the case is that anyone who has a realistic understanding of the way the political process works would recognize that this kind of manipulation is fatal to it. Most people are busy and have a life to live, so they're not spending all of their time trying to learn about every single statute and every single regulation. They're voting. Yeah, they're going to blame whoever it looks like is responsible. So here, New Jersey voters thought New Jersey was to blame for this law prohibiting sports gambling, not realizing that federal bureaucrats were holding the puppet strings. And we point out that is really an undeniable fact. Most voters can't even name a single member of the Supreme Court justice, even though they recognize that what the work the justices do affects their daily lives. So to say that, it's fine for Congress to manipulate the states and confuse people about who's responsible for what, is just, farcical.
Interestingly enough, because I see some other consequences, based on how the Supreme Court will necessarily rule on this case. It's federalism, 10th Amendment, all these kinds of things. And I see that it has some far-reaching back-end, I don't want to say consequences in a bad term. I actually think in this case it might be a good thing, for states' rights, the whole separate but equal. Do you see that to be the same thing? I mean, can you kind of make that prediction?
So I think you're right that the impacts of the decision will be far-reaching. Immediately, this is the only statute that will be struck down as unconstitutional because it really is one of a kind. Generally, when Congress wants to regulate something, it regulates people directly. It doesn't try to launder its power through the states. So immediately, it's really just a statute. But in the long run, if the Supreme Court let Congress get away with this, it could apply to any policy area Congress might wish to control. So it really would fundamentally rework the relationship between the states and the federal government. And for that reason, as we explained in our brief, this is really something that should unite people on the right as well as the left, because whatever it is that you care about, that you'd like to see the states improve as a policy matter, it is threatened by the idea that Congress can control what the states do.
Well, I mean, a word that I see here that doesn't probably get used enough is sovereignty. I mean, there was a time where the states were running the federal government, and I don't know exactly the moment that whole thing switched, but does the word sovereignty get kind of lost in this argument?
I don't think so. I think that's actually ultimately what the Supreme Court is trying to protect. It's saying that it is particularly troubling for the federal government to try to control how states exercise their own sovereignty. It's one thing for the federal government to say that individual people can't, for instance, have or sell marijuana. It's another to say that a state has to exercise its sovereign power to pass a law or to enforce a law prohibiting that possession. That kind of change is so fundamentally at odds with our Constitution and with the idea that states are independent of the federal government and not controlled by it, that it cannot be allowed in a single case.
They're kind of playing devil's advocate here. There are conditions by which I think that, the federal government can go in and knock on the door of these states and say, you must comply to these certain things because of, civil protections and national security kind of things. Plus, the federal government is giving them monies, block grants and whatever else, in order for them to carry out certain duties to comply with federal law. But this is not the case when it comes to this betting situation, correct?
That's right. And your question actually highlights one of the other reasons why the court should strike this law down. If Congress can't control states and forbid them from changing their own laws, that will in no way frustrate the state and the federal government's ability to pursue policy. It wouldn't forbid Congress, for instance, on imposing strings on federal money to state or local governments. It can continue to use that power to encourage states to cooperate in policy issues. And it obviously wouldn't stop the federal government from regulating directly. If PASPA were struck down by the Supreme Court, Congress could, the very next day, pass a law forbidding sports gambling as a matter of law, and that wouldn't be unconstitutional. And the reality is it's unlikely it ever would, because we've seen through PASPA that kind of prohibition just doesn't work and actually makes the problem worse. So the only reason why we have the statute today is that gridlock, the idea that it is incredibly difficult to get anything passed through Congress, especially when it's repealing a law. No one runs our campaigns on the idea that I reduce the number of laws that apply to you. It's always vote for me because I supported this extra new law.
This law or this case for oral argument is Christie versus NCAA. Why is it that Chris Christie's name is on this? Because of his legislature?
So yes, Christie is the defendant in the case because he's the governor of New Jersey. As I said it earlier at the top of the interview, the voters of New Jersey passed a referendum by an overwhelming margin calling for the state to legalize sports gambling. It has so far tried to twice. First, the legislature passed a law basically creating a licensing and permitting regime for sports gambling so you could open up a sports book if you got a permit. And the governor is obviously responsible for implementing that law. The sports leagues sued, saying that violates PASPA because the affirmative grant of a permit is illegal. The courts agreed. The Supreme Court decided not to take it. So instead, the legislature tried again, this time just saying, we're not going to issue any permits. We're not going to issue any licenses. We're just going to repeal the prohibition on sports gambling that we have. And then, people will place their bets at the casinos or whatever, but we're not going to license it. And the sports leagues did it again. They challenged that, and now it's gone all the way to the Supreme Court. And one of the ironies is that even the sports leagues that are challenging New Jersey's attempt to legalize sports gambling, all of their commissioners admit that has to happen, that PASPA is broken. So Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, shortly after he took that position, acknowledged that sports betting is part of the future. It's why people watch the sport, and it would be far better if it were regulated rather than subject to this prohibition that has utterly failed.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't just, NCAA being basketball or football or, I mean, this has to do with hockey and whatever other sports out there. So, I mean, it goes way beyond the NCAA, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It applies to every professional and amateur sports event. So NFL games, the March Madness tournament, NBA, any game you might want to place a bet on. If you're outside of Nevada, you're committing a crime. So when President Obama bragged about betting on the Super Bowl, he was basically bragging about violating federal law.
Now, you said earlier, Jonathan, that this gambling industry was worth about $150 billion. Where did that number come from, and would you expect that number to increase if there's a positive decision out of the Supreme Court?
So the estimate comes from the American Gaming Association, which has been lobbying for reform of PASPA. Institutionally, they recognize that it's better to have sports betting and gambling happening in a legal, regulated market than all of it being illegal in the black market. Sports gambling today really is in the same position that alcohol used to be under prohibition. It is widely practiced. People like it and have no interest in stopping. And by forcing it all to happen illegally, you encourage all sorts of other illegal behaviors. So illegal groups are involved in profiting immensely from the illegal sports gambling, and a lot of those problems would go away if it were legalized.
There was a movement that several years ago to take this betting offshore, and that was shut down pretty fast. Is that as a consequence of this this crazy law, or what? This PASPA law?
I believe that was a similar but different law where the federal government was actually itself saying this is our policy and we're going to enforce it. As I said, what makes PASPA unique is that the federal government is going to states and saying this is the law you have to have and that you have to enforce, and that's really where the constitutional violation happens.
Now, Pacific Legal Foundation filed an amicus brief. Who's taking the lead on this at the Supreme Court? So
at the Supreme Court, you have two of the most famous oral advocates arguing both sides of the case. The sports leagues are represented by a former Solicitor General, Paul Clement, and New Jersey is represented by Ted Olson, who really are two of the most famous Supreme Court oral advocates that we have. As I said, I at PLF filed an amicus brief supporting New Jersey's efforts to take down the constitutional law. We were thankfully joined in that brief by the Competitive Enterprise Institute, Cato, and the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. And there were many groups, including several states, aligned on the side of New Jersey, recognizing that the principle at issue in this case is so much bigger than sports gambling. As I said earlier, regardless of what policy issue you care about, it is vital that it remains something that states are allowed to experiment with. That is the only way we can see what policies work and what don't.
Well, I would imagine that the leagues themselves, including, the NBA or the NFL or the NCAA, you expect the decision to happen, in June of 2018 from the Supreme Court?
Yes, probably June or July.
Okay, so I would then expect some of these leagues of these major sports, hockey and whatnot, they're going to have, as you said earlier, they would necessarily agree with this, but they would have to change some policies inside their own ranks. So that could have some other consequences, I would think. And, we don't necessarily know what that would be. Typically, when a case is argued before the Supreme Court, is that something that's just done in a day? There's a day assigned to that? Or is this, are these arguments, take 2 or 3 days? What does that look like? Because, that's not stuff that's necessarily televised.
Right. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court has been very resistant to the idea of televising its oral arguments. The only way you can hear the audio afterwards or read the transcript, but that's the only way that most members of the public would ever have the chance to experience an oral argument. It's very hard to get into the courtroom. It's small. Generally, oral arguments are pretty short. Each side gets 30 minutes. The court tries to have 2 or 3 a day during oral argument days. To sort of reduce the number of days it has to hold those arguments and show up to work. So I certainly expect that on the morning of December 4th, after the transcript and oral arguments released, we'll have some indication of which way the court is leaning, but we won't know for sure, likely until June or July when it issues the opinion.
And for whoever who issues the opinion or the dissenting opinions, those are kind of done on a rotational basis, correct?
It is up to the Chief Justice, assuming he's in the majority, he gets to pick who writes the opinion. This is the kind of issue that I think would appeal to him, so perhaps we'll get a very strong opinion from the Chief Justice. I'm feeling confident based on the indications we've got so far. It took 4 justices voting to take up the case, and it took 4 votes to call for the United States to participate, and both of those happened before or after the late Justice Scalia passed away. So there were 4 votes of 4 justices interested when there were only 8 justices on the court. And since we've added Justice Gorsuch, I think it's pretty easy to get to 5. He's made it pretty clear that he is committed to federalism and is extremely worried about overreach at the federal level.
Was Pacific Legal Foundation and Competitive Enterprise Institute and Cato, whatnot, were they all kind of surprised that the Supreme Court took this case?
A little bit. So as I said, this is the second time PASPA has been challenged by New Jersey, and a lot of us expected the Supreme Court to take it the first time. So it is a little odd that they decided not to take the case the first time it was presented to them and waited for basically a carbon copy to come up. But as I said, I think the issue is so important that it was really only a matter of time. Lots of states are dealing with similar issues. It's not just sports gambling, but daily fantasy sports also gets wrapped up into PASPA because it's placing bets on, or a form of bets on individual sporting events. And so that has been something that's affected probably a dozen states that have tried to figure out, well, how do we regulate this without running afoul of PASPA? And that might have given the court the extra incentive it needed to weigh in.
Jonathan Wood, well done, and thanks for your time here on the Denise Simon Experience. We'll be watching this one pretty closely because I know that we bet in this house, and so thank you, and hook 'em horns.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience, and we'll see you again very soon.